Delighted to welcome to the show the Minister for COVID vaccine deployment, Nadhim Zahawi. Good morning to you.
Good morning to you.
Thank you so much for joining us. Let's have a little talk, first of all, about what's happening at the G7 summit. Obviously, more world leaders arriving today and some more just outside the G7 summit who are guests who are arriving over the weekend. So far, very successful. Boris Johnson and the president US president seem to be getting on very well. And crucially, this announcement of 500,000 COVID vaccines to be donated to poorer countries from America and 100 million from the UK. All well and good, but many people might say it's not very many, is it? I mean, those vaccines effectively will help 300 million people. Well, there are another 7 billion people on the planet, aren't there?
You're quite right, but I think the G7 being able to deliver 1 billion doses will make a difference. We've seen 1.5 billion doses manufactured, one third of which, by the way, 500 million are the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, and through the UK government's investment and the Oxford team and AstraZeneca, we have delivered those 500 million doses to those countries in most need at no profit whilst the pandemic is with the world. The announcement today from Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, is for an additional 100 million doses from the United Kingdom, with 5 million in the next few weeks, and then another 25 million by the end of the year, and then the balance 70 million next year. These will make a real difference to low and middle income countries, as will the 500 million from President Biden that they're also delivering as part of Boris Johnson's call to the G7 to deliver that additional billion. Of course, Pfizer and Moderna and Johnson & Johnson have also pledged to deliver another 1.3 billion doses at cost to low and middle income countries. So the manufacturing scale up has begun. Let me give you an example. Pfizer, when we begun vaccinating with their vaccine, first country to regulate and then vaccinate on the 8th of December, their capacity for 2021 was only about 1.2 billion doses. They reconfigured their manufacturing capability. They're going to be able to do over 3 billion doses in 2021. AstraZeneca, 20 sites around the world now manufacturing at scale. So you're going to see both the private sector and the public sector, governments coming together to vaccinate the whole of the planet, as well as, of course, our first priority to the British people, to make sure that we protect them, to get their 2 doses in this phase, and then, of course, a booster campaign possibly beginning in the autumn.
There have been some scientists and medics recently talking about how, well, no one's safe until everyone's safe. Indeed, people like Bill Gates, Tony Blair and others put in their tuppence worth on this. So we were told when we went into this lockdown in January that we would start coming out of the lockdown as soon as over 70s had their jabs. And that didn't happen, and we waited and we waited. And then we were told, oh, OK, over 50s start having those jabs. We are now in a situation where we're told, well, we need to pretty much get everyone jabbed. The goalposts do keep being moved. We're told now this is all due to the Indian variant, which is, Professor Neil Ferguson says, up to 60% more transmissible than the Kent variant, which itself was far more transmissible than the original variant we had in this country that caused the problems last year, as opposed to what we had in January. We're always going to have new variants, and it is normally the case that viruses mutate to become more transmissible, but often less deadly. Given how many people are vaccinated in this country, with a superb, absolutely brilliant vaccine rollout, I mean, all credit to the government for getting that in every single aspect of it, ordering it and getting it out into people's arms. 1 million people on Tuesday in their 20s booking their vaccine places. People are signing up to it in their droves. Given the success of that rollout, given the success of the vaccines in dealing with any variant we've seen so far, why on earth would we need to delay the lockdown easing and lockdown end on June the 21st?
So a lot to unpack there in your question. If you remember, on the 22nd of February, when the Prime Minister announced the roadmap, the 4 steps to taking our freedoms back, our life back, getting the economy up on its feet again, we had 4 tests. The first was vaccines continue at scale, big tick. That carries on. And if you get the text, please come forward for your second dose, because we know against the Indian variant, it's the 2 doses that offer them the maximum protection.
you said something about the viruses mutating. They do mutate. You're absolutely right. But you said they may become more infectious, but less, less
more
deadly.
Transmissible, but less deadly. That is the general direction of travel for viruses, yeah.
Interesting enough, with the 617.2, the variant first discovered in India, it looks like it's more transmissible and probably for those who get infected have more serious, severe disease from it. So it doesn't follow that model that
is there evidence for that from what we've seen in Bolton and Blackburn, where it's been surging?
Yes. Early evidence is that those who get infected who aren't vaccinated, and 75% of those people in the 12,500 who've been infected weren't vaccinated, which is why vaccines are so important. It is more severe. Now, how much more severe?
I'm sorry, I don't know what evidence have you got for that statement? Because if you look at what the NHS England their actual data for people going into hospital and people being admitted to hospital and how long they stay in hospital, that isn't borne out by their stats.
Well, it was by the Public Health England experts who looked at this.
But they're looking at this, unless they've got different official statistics than the ones that were published. We've already seen in Bolton it's peaked and it's going down without any extra lockdown restrictions. Blackburn is now the peak, but we've heard from Chris Hobson from the NHS providers saying that, look, the people going into hospital, they're going into hospital, but they're going in for a couple of days. They're not as sick, they're not elderly, they're young people, they need a bit of oxygen and they leave again. We're not talking about people who are in their 80s who are spending 3 weeks on a ventilator and very, very tragically dying. We are in a completely different circumstance than where we were in January.
I don't disagree, and that's the miracle of the vaccines. All I can say to you is Public Health England's scientists advise us, and they say it's more transmissible and very likely to when infected, be more severe.
Except that the stats so far don't show that.
Well, you say that, so let's look at the stats. So cases in the past week have risen by 63.2%. The vaccines are working clearly, which is why hospitalization has only risen by 7.1%, but it has risen. And of course, deaths have risen by 1.9%. But as I say, vaccines are the real way out of this and the real protection. The tests were vaccines at scale. Vaccines continue to work. Double dose, big tick. Infection rates we have to bear down on, because actually this battle against this enemy, this invisible enemy, has been hard fought and hard won. And to squander those gains now, because the virus hasn't gone away, it'll attempt to mutate. The way it does that is by infecting more and more people to try and mutate and escape.
But why would we squander those new gains? I mean, I'm sure you're double jabbed.
Julia, can I just finish this point? The fourth test is the variants of concern. So we've got to make sure we look at all four. Now, there's not long to go. Monday, we'll be able to share all the data, as we've done at every step. The 4 weeks plus one, so 5 week intervals, were deliberate so that we can actually see what the virus is doing as we open up. There's a very big opening on the 17th of May, where people are able to go to restaurants indoors, pubs indoors, lots of other social interactions between families and friends. But we'll share that data with the nation. All I would say is these hard-won battles against the virus, we do not want to squander.
But why would we be squandering it? If you're double jabbed, you're as safe as you're going to be. In which case, why can't people who are double jabbed continue their lives? The people who might be more at risk, they can take extra precautions for a few weeks if they so feel the need. Young people are not at risk of dying of the disease or even being seriously hospitalised on a grand scale. The NHS have said they can cope. That's not squandering this. The Prime Minister predicted in April, after we did the first proper lockdown easing, pubs opening and the like, that there would be people dying. People are going to continue to die of this disease forevermore. Are we just going to keep restrictions forever because some people are dying? Or do we say at some point, we've rolled out the jab, the most vulnerable have jabbed, we now get on with life and we take our chances?
So you're absolutely right. We will transition this virus from a pandemic stage to endemic. And what I'm working on with my team is that future-proofing, whether it be the booster shots in the autumn to protect the most vulnerable and increase their antibody protection and T-cell protection, or what I believe will happen, and what we're planning for, is a similar vaccination program to the flu annual vaccination program that we do every year.
But it's only worthwhile if we've got our freedoms back at the same time, isn't it? I know you've got to go. I'm going to be really naughty. One more question quickly. Matt Hancock yesterday defending himself against Dominic Cummings, what he'd had to say. He said he should have been sacked as Health Secretary numerous times. He said that there wasn't a PPE shortage across the country back last spring, and that care homes were not basically seeded with the virus, which led to thousands of deaths because of people being sent out of hospital with the COVID without having been tested. It was as a result of staff coming in. Do you agree with him?
So I do agree with him. Matt was quoting the National Audit Office report, where they spoke to the front line, the trust they spoke to, and there was their findings was that there was no national shortage. That does not detract from the experience of people on the front line who may have certainly felt that they had difficulty in getting PPE. We entered this pandemic, Julia, with the capacity to only produce about 2% of our PPE needs, only 2,000 tests a day. We've scaled both. We can now produce 70% of our PPE. We conduct, this last 7 days, almost 6 million tests in the United Kingdom. There is lessons to learn, of course. There will be a public inquiry to come. But I think Matt Hancock was right. And on the infection rates, clearly the infection rates from people entering care homes, whether it be staff or others, made a much bigger impact on infection rates.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm going to let you go because I know you've got to get to another interview. COVID vaccine deployment Minister Nadhim Zahawi, really appreciate you joining us. Thank you so much.